I think in Arab-Israeli peacemaking, the United States has and will continue to take a leading role, largely because the United States is the only power in the world in which the Israelis are willing to have us play the role of an interlocutor with the Arab parties. They simply do not have the confidence in the United Nations and less confidence in the Europeans, and so that's been a reality given the close relationship between the United States and Israel. So we play that role. Also, we do have, despite all our difficulties in the Arab world, we have very structural and important relationships with the Arab parties, be it Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, with the Arab world in general. So we can play that role, and we can lead the international efforts to support peace, both European, Russian, Chinese, and in the Arab world itself. So the role of the American president is, I would say it's critical. So President Bush is starting again very late in his administration, the last year of his administration. I think it is a positive and a good step. There's a lot of skepticism, as if there's enough time for him to bring anything truly to final settlement. But if he does engage the persona of the American presidency in these negotiations, I think that real progress can be made in two very important areas. One, on the ground, in terms of the Israelis living up to their obligations and the Palestinians living up to their obligations on security. But for this to succeed, the president is going to have to roll up his sleeves. He and his Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, they're going to have to be engaged in a real-time, sustained basis. This goes beyond just some shuttle diplomacy and trips to the reason. They really have to use the influence of the United States in a short period of time to bring the parties together. Yes, I can. I think there have been years of negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and also, for example, between the Israelis and the Syrians on the northern front. There are very few issues on the Israeli-Lebanese side. I think once there is progress on the Israeli-Syrian negotiation, the Lebanese negotiations will be brought home very quickly. But if you take a look at what was achieved during the Clinton administration at the end, they failed to come to a settlement. But they did narrow the issues very strongly on the key areas. For example, a general agreement that the final border has to be based on the 1967 June 4 lines. When you look at the refugee issue, there's a general agreement that's very contentious that Palestinian refugees will largely go to the new state of Palestine or be resettled in the countries they're in at or elsewhere and compensated for. That the principle of return, if carried out fully, would inundate the state of Israel with so many Palestinians that Israel would lose its status as a democratic Jewish state. So while that is an extremely contentious issue, there is a realization over the years that you have to be a little more practical about this in order to get the two-state solution accomplished. When you look at the issue of Jerusalem, there can be a settlement on Jerusalem. In fact, I think Jerusalem is probably easier to negotiate than the Palestinian refugee issue. But there is a general understanding that there will be a Palestinian state and an Israeli state, each one that will claim Jerusalem as its capital. And like the eastern sectors of Jerusalem, which is Arab populated largely, will become the capital of the state of Palestine. And of course the western section will be the capital of the state of Israel, and there'll be some arrangement on the holy places, which are holy to all three monotheistic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, that there'll be certain special arrangements made for the Holy Basin, as they call it. So in general, I think that as daunting as these final status issues seem to be, a lot of work has been done. And therefore, get back to the key factor, which is political will and courage on the part of the leaders involved, both Arab, Israeli, and Western leaders, especially the United States. This is an incredibly difficult phenomenon to deal with, and it's, as you know, relatively recent. In 2006, Hamas won the elections in the Palestinian territories. Then in 2007, they committed this coup in Gaza and took over Gaza militarily, given the differences between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. And therefore, the Palestinian political community is severely split. It's split, if you will, ideologically, politically, and territorially. Now, I think the only hope is that if President Abu Mazen of the Palestinian Authority can make headway on the peace negotiations and can consolidate his position, there's no doubt in my mind that the Palestinians are going to have to come to some reconciliation amongst themselves. But better that be done when the moderates, such as Abu Mazen and the Palestinian Authority, can then reach out to Hamas and make the necessary arrangements. But that, I think Abu Mazen's hand has to be strengthened before there can be any sort of political incorporation of Hamas into the Palestinian entity. Well, this is a huge issue, is the promotion of democracy in the Muslim world and the Muslim countries. I think we have to stop being naive about how we approach democracy promotion in the Arab world and the Muslim world. First of all, Islam is the predominant religion of the region. Secondly, there are very important Islamist organizations, leaders, and parties in the Muslim world. If you're going to promote democracy, you have to expect that Islamist parties are going to come to power in one way or another. Perhaps not in all cases, but they're going to have a political role. There are secular parties in the Muslim world. There are religious parties. The important thing is to, I believe, the realistic way to promote democracy, especially in the Muslim world, is not to concentrate on elections. Per se, elections are one factor in democracy. For example, there are electoral autocracies in the Middle East. You have elections where dictators are elected by 90% of the vote plus. Is that democracy? What we should be promoting are the building blocks of democracy in the Middle East, in the broader Middle East, and building up the institutions of democracy. That means the rule of law and judiciary systems that are independent, political parties, civil society, NGOs. In other words, the rule of law, the adoption of the principle of the alternation of power, which means that if you're elected in this round, your party, and you lose during the next elections, you step aside peacefully. All of these principles of democracy have to be inculcated, not from scratch, but they have to be built up. And I think the United States would be much better served in this long-term process of building institutions that can promote broader political participation than trying to parachute in an American model of democracy into the sands of Arabia. It's simply not going to take.